The first time I saw a human child, I thought it was broken. That sounds terrible, I know. But honestly, what else was I supposed to think? The creature was small, barely reaching my lower thorax, with soft pink skin that looked like it would tear if you breathed on it too hard. No protective scales, no venomous spines, no bioluminescent warning patterns. Nothing. Just this tiny, fragile thing stumbling around the landing bay of Station Gamma 7 with what I can only describe as a look of pure determination on its face. "Excuse me," the small human said, tugging on my lower appendage. "Have you seen a honey badger?" I stared down at it. The translator implant in my auditory canal buzzed with confusion, unable to properly parse the term. "A what now?" I asked, all three of my eye stalks bending toward this bizarre little creature. "A honey badger. About this big." The child held its tiny appendages apart, indicating something roughly the size of a standard cargo container's security lock. Black and white. Really mean looking. Answers to Brutus. Now, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Klykes, and I'm what you'd call a station administrator for the Galactic Commerce Guild. I've been working on Gamma 7 for about 12 cycles now, ever since the humans joined the wider galactic community and started setting up trade routes. Before that, I thought I'd seen everything. I've processed cargo manifests for the Vrelian Hive collectives, mediated disputes between quantum-phased merchants, and once spent 3 hours explaining to a Zorgothian captain why he couldn't park his ship inside the reactor core. But this was new. "Child," I said, trying to sound patient, "where are your guardians?" The human, who introduced herself as Riley Thompson, age 7, pointed vaguely toward the commercial district. "Dad's meeting with some boring trade people. Mom's checking out the medical supplies. They said I could look around as long as I stayed in the public areas. And this Brutus creature? He's my pet. I brought him from Earth. He got out of his carrier about an hour ago." My middle eye twitched, a nervous habit I'd developed since humans started frequenting the station. "What exactly is a honey badger?" Riley's face lit up with the kind of enthusiasm that I'd learned meant trouble when it came from humans. "Oh, they're the toughest animals on Earth. They fight lions and eat cobras, and they have really thick skin so nothing can bite through it, and they never give up, and Brutus is the best one ever because he's my friend and I love him and we need to find him right now." The child said all of this in one breath. "Humans do that. It's disturbing." "Right," I said slowly. "Perhaps we should alert station security?" "Already did," said a voice behind me. I turned to see Grix, my second in command, lumbering over on his 6 legs. Grix is a Thoraxian, built like a mobile mountain with mandibles that could crush titanium. He was holding a data pad and looking more worried than I'd ever seen him. "Boss, we've got a situation." "Define situation." "Well, about 45 minutes ago, a small Earth creature designated as a honey badger escaped from temporary holding in Bay 12. Since then, it has infiltrated the ventilation system, raided 3 food storage units, caused a level 2 containment breach in the exotic pet shop, freed approximately 17 restricted species, and somehow managed to shut down life support in Section D4. I felt my chromatic sacs drain of color. How? How is that even possible? According to the security footage, Grix continued, pulling up a holographic display, the creature is highly intelligent, extremely aggressive, and appears to have absolutely no fear of anything. We watched the recording. There, on the grainy footage, was indeed a small black and white animal with a distinctive stripe pattern. It was currently engaged in what could only be described as a fight with a Krell warrior, one of those 7-foot-tall reptilian mercenaries that most species cross the corridor to avoid. The honey badger was winning. "By the 7 moons of Arcturus," I whispered. It just bit him on the snout. The Krell warrior, his pride clearly wounded along with his face, had retreated. The honey badger made a sound that the translator rendered as something between a growl and a laugh, then proceeded to destroy a valuable Ming Dynasty vase that had been on display in the cultural exhibit. Riley, meanwhile, had climbed onto a nearby bench to see the footage better. "Yep, that's Brutus. See how his left ear has that little notch? He got that fighting a snake back home." "Your pet fights snakes?" I asked weakly. "He fights everything. Mom says he's got an attitude problem. Dad says he's just confident. I say he's perfect." "Your parents let you keep this as a pet?" Riley shrugged. A peculiar human gesture I'd learned meant anything from, I don't know to yes, but I don't want to talk about it to technically no, but they haven't caught me yet. I suspected it, was the third option. Okay, I said, my voice taking on the tone I usually reserved for emergency protocols. Grix, seal all exits from the commercial district. Alert all residents to remain in their quarters. Contact the Krell security force and tell them we have a Class 3 biological hazard loose on the station. Already tried that, boss. The Krell are refusing to respond. Apparently, word got around about what happened to Grimlock, and they're calling it a matter of honor that they not engage with a creature smaller than a standard ration pack. What? The creature humiliated him, boss. In Krell culture, that's worse than death. I felt a headache forming between my primary and secondary cerebral lobes. This was exactly the kind of chaos that had become standard since humans joined the galactic community. They brought their strange customs, their bizarre emotional responses, and apparently, their insane, death-world animals. Riley, I said, turning back to the child. Why, exactly, do humans keep such dangerous creatures as pets? She looked at me like I just asked why water was wet. Because they're cool. Cool. Yeah, cool. Also, Brutus is my best friend. We do everything together. Well, we did until he got mad about being in the carrier for the jump. He doesn't like being locked up. Most creatures don't enjoy containment. Grix offered helpfully. Yeah, but Brutus really doesn't like it. One time, he tore through 3 layers of reinforced steel just because he wanted to see what was in the shed. Turns out it was just Dad's old tools, but Brutus doesn't care about that. He cares about freedom and fighting and eating everything he can find. My headache intensified. A sudden alarm blared through the station, the high-pitched wail that indicated a breach in the restricted zones. My communicator crackled to life. Administrator clicks, we have a problem in the weapons vault. Of course, the demon creature had found its way to the weapons vault. I grabbed Riley's small appendage, which I think humans call a hand, and started moving toward the security center. Come with me. We need to contain this situation before your pet starts an interstellar incident. Brutus isn't my pet, Riley said, trotting along beside me with surprising speed for such short legs. He's my partner. There's a difference. Is there? Yep. A pet does what you tell it. A partner does what it wants, and sometimes that's the same thing you want, and sometimes it's not, but you stick together anyway. I had no idea how to respond to that particular bit of human philosophy, so I didn't try. When we arrived at the security center, it was absolute mayhem. Screens showed multiple camera feeds from different parts of the station, and in almost every one, I could see signs of the honey badger's passage. Overturned containers, broken equipment, frightened aliens of various species, pressed against walls or hiding in storage compartments. And there, in the center of the weapons vault camera feed, was Brutus. The creature had somehow managed to activate the holographic weapons display, and was currently batting at the floating images with its paws like they were toys. When that got boring, it turned its attention to a crate of plasma rifles, attempting to pry it open with its claws. We need to gas the room, suggested Torvik, the head of security. He was a Mandorian, all business and no humor. Knock it unconscious and retrieve it before it causes more damage. No, Riley shouted, her voice reaching a pitch that made everyone in the room wince. You can't hurt Brutus. He's just scared and confused. That creature, Torvik said flatly, does not look scared. He was right. On the screen, Brutus had abandoned the plasma rifles and was now attempting to fight his own reflection in a polished shield display. He was losing, which only seemed to make him angrier. He's in an unfamiliar place with strange smells and sounds, Riley insisted. Of course he's acting out. He just needs to know I'm here. Then he'll calm down. Absolutely not, I said. There is no possible reality where I allow a small human child to enter a room with a creature that has already injured 3 security personnel and terrorized half the station. Riley crossed her arms over her chest and fixed me with a look that, despite coming from something barely a meter tall, actually made me nervous. Brutus knows me. He trusts me. I can get him to come back to the carrier peacefully. But if you try to hurt him or capture him, he'll just get madder and fight harder. That's what honey badgers do. They never give up, ever. The child might have a point, Grix said quietly. Human children often have unusual bonds with their companion animals. Their species evolved alongside predators. They understand them in ways we don't. I looked at the screen again. Brutus had now discovered a box of energy rations and was methodically destroying them, apparently just for the joy of destruction. If I allow this, I said slowly, and anything happens to you, your parents will probably declare war on this entire station. Dad's a doctor and Mom's a teacher. They don't declare wars, but they do get really disappointed, and that's worse. Riley paused. Also, they signed like a million waivers before we left Earth, so technically you're probably fine. That was not reassuring. But watching Brutus on the screen, currently attempting to intimidate a storage bot that was trying to clean up the mess, I realized we were running out of options. The creature showed no signs of tiring, and every minute it remained loose increased the chances of serious injury or property damage. Or both. Fine, I said, the word tasting like defeat. But you wear a personal shield generator, and I'm monitoring everything through the security feed. At the first sign of danger, we're pulling you out with tractor beams. Riley's face split into a massive smile that showed all her small white teeth. You won't regret this. I already did. 10 minutes later, we had Riley outfitted in a child-sized personal shield generator, which she complained made her look dorky. I had no idea what that meant, but I assumed it was negative. We also gave her a communicator and a tracking beacon, though I suspected the latter was more for our peace of mind than any actual safety benefit. The door to the weapons vault opened with a hiss of pressurized air. Riley stepped through confidently, calling out in that high-pitched human voice, Brutus, Brutus, where are you, buddy? For a moment, nothing happened. Then, from behind an overturned crate of photon grenades, a black and white head emerged. Small dark eyes fixed on the child. There was a tense pause where I genuinely considered engaging the emergency extraction protocols. Then Brutus made a sound, something the translator couldn't parse but that sounded almost happy, and charged directly at Riley. Every alarm in my body screamed. My hand hovered over the emergency button. Riley dropped to her knees and opened her arms. The honey badger slammed into her with enough force that it should have knocked her over. Instead, she just laughed and wrapped her small arms around the creature's body, while it made excited, chittering sounds, and licked her face with a tongue that looked disturbingly long. I missed you too, you crazy furball, Riley said, her voice muffled by fur. You can't just run off like that. You scared everyone. Brutus responded with more chittering, and while I couldn't understand the sounds, I got the distinct impression the creature was explaining, in great detail, all the adventures he'd had, and all the things he destroyed. Riley nodded seriously, like she understood every word. Okay, but we talked about this. No biting unless something is actually trying to hurt us. That Krell guy was just doing his job. More chittering. I know you didn't like him. But still. On the security feed, I watched this bizarre exchange between human child and terrifying death world animal, and I realized something that made my chromatic sacs shift to a confused purple. They really were partners. All right, Brutus, Riley said, standing up. The honey badger immediately climbed onto her shoulder, wrapping around her neck like some kind of aggressive scarf. Let's go find Mom and Dad. They're probably wondering where we are. She walked back to the door with absolute confidence. The creature that had terrorized an entire space station now docilely perched on her shoulders, occasionally making contented sounds. The door opened, and Riley stepped through, still covered in a honey badger. She looked up at me with that bright human smile. See? I told you it would be fine. I looked at Grix. Grix looked at me. Neither of us had words. Right. I finally managed. Perhaps in the future, it would be best if Brutus remained in more secure containment during your visits to the station? Riley's expression turned thoughtful. Yeah, probably. But you should know something about honey badgers, Mr. Klyax. What's that? They don't really like being told what to do. They kind of just do whatever they want. That's why we love them. She walked off toward the commercial district, the most dangerous creature on the station riding peacefully on her shoulders, and I understood something fundamental about humans that the rest of the galaxy was still learning. They don't just survive on their death world. They befriend the things that would kill everything else. And somehow, impossibly, they make it work. I turned to Grix. Make a note in all future human visitor protocols. Section 7. Subsection 12. Never. Under any circumstances, assume a human's companion animal is actually tame. Already done, boss. And add a secondary note. If a human child says their pet is friendly, they're probably right. But they have a very different definition of friendly than the rest of the galaxy. That too, boss. I watched Riley disappear around the corner, Brutus still perched on her shoulders, and I sent a silent prayer to whatever deities were listening that we'd make it through the rest of the Thompson family's visit without any more incidents. That prayer, as it turned out, was wildly optimistic. But that's a story for another time. 3 hours after the honey badger incident, I was starting to believe we might actually survive the Thompson family's visit without further catastrophe. I should have known better. The trouble started again when Riley's father, Dr. Marcus Thompson, finished his trade negotiations and decided to take his family on a tour of the station's observation deck. This seemed harmless enough. Humans liked looking at stars. Most species did. It was practically a universal constant. What wasn't universal was bringing Brutus along. I really must protest, I said, following the Thompson family through the corridors while keeping a respectful distance from the honey badger. The observation deck is a peaceful space meant for contemplation and cultural exchange. Your companion animal has already caused significant disruption today. Dr. Thompson, a tall human with graying hair and an expression of perpetual mild amusement, simply smiled. Clikes, my friend, Brutus has been cooped up for weeks during our journey here. He needs enrichment. Besides, Riley has him on a leash now. What could possibly go wrong? I looked at the so-called leash. It was a thin cord of braided material attached to a harness around Brutus's body. The honey badger was currently walking beside Riley, occasionally stopping to sniff things or make threatening gestures at passing station residents. That restraint looks insufficient, I observed. It's reinforced carbon fiber, said Riley's mother, Dr. Yuki Thompson, who carried herself with the calm authority of someone used to dealing with crises. She was a medical professional specializing in xenobiology, which explained why she seemed utterly unfazed by having a honey badger in the family. Rated for 1,500 pounds of tensile strength. Brutus weighs maybe 30 pounds, Riley added helpfully. That calculation, I said carefully, assumes the restraint point holds. What is the harness attached to? Riley held up her small wrist, where the leash was looped. Me. You weigh considerably less than 1,500 pounds. Yeah, but Brutus won't pull hard enough to hurt me. He knows better. The honey badger looked up at me with those dark, unreadable eyes, and I got the distinct impression it was calculating exactly how much chaos it could cause while technically remaining on the leash. We reached the observation deck without incident, which should have been my first warning. The deck was a massive transparent dome that offered 360-degree views of the surrounding space. Currently, visible were the twin moons of Helios Prime, the glittering traffic lanes of commercial vessels, and the distant nebula known as the Dragon's Breath. It was beautiful, peaceful, serene. About 24 beings from various species were scattered around the deck, some meditating, others taking photographs, a few engaged in quiet conversation. Then Brutus saw the Quilovian. Now, I should explain something about Quilovians. They're a peaceful species, mostly traders and artists, covered in long, flowing tendrils that change color based on their emotional state. They look, to human eyes apparently, somewhat like ambulatory mopheads. Very dignified, very cultured ambulatory mopheads. To a honey badger's eyes, they apparently looked like prey. Brutus made a sound I'd never heard before, something between a chirp and a war cry, and lunged forward with shocking speed. Riley, caught off guard, stumbled and lost her grip on the leash. The honey badger rocketed across the observation deck like a furry missile. "Brutus, no!" Riley shouted. But it was too late. The Quilovian, whose name I later learned was HFY, saw the approaching predator, and did what any sensible being would do. He tried to run. This was a mistake. His flowing tendrils, which he'd been artfully arranging for a commemorative photograph, got tangled around his locomotion appendages. He fell. Brutus pounced. What followed was not an attack. Precisely. It was more like an aggressive investigation. The honey badger grabbed one of the Quilovian's tendrils in his mouth and shook it vigorously, apparently trying to determine if it was edible. HFY's color shifted rapidly through the spectrum, finally settling on a shade of purple that my translator interpreted as profound indignation mixed with terror. "Someone grab that creature," shouted Torvik, who'd been stationed nearby specifically because of Brutus's earlier rampage. 3 security officers moved forward. Brutus, sensing incoming threats, released the tendril and spun to face them. His back arched, his fur stood on end, and he made a hissing sound that seemed far too loud to come from something so small. The security officers stopped. "He's bluffing," Torvik insisted. "He can't possibly fight all 3 of you." Brutus charged the nearest officer, a Cathari warrior twice the size of a full-grown human. The warrior took one look at the approaching ball of fury and actually stepped backward. "Somebody do something," I yelled, all pretense of administrative calm abandoned. "I'll get him," Riley said, already running forward. "Riley, wait," her mother called, but the child was already closing the distance. Here's what happened next, and I had to watch the security footage multiple times afterward to believe it. Riley didn't grab Brutus. She didn't try to restrain him. She simply got between the honey badger and the security officers, held up both hands, and said in a firm voice, "Brutus, sit." The honey badger stopped mid-charge. "Sit," Riley repeated. Brutus sat. The entire observation deck went silent. Every being present stared at this impossible scene. A small human child commanding a creature that had just terrified trained security personnel. "Good boy," Riley said, her voice gentle now. She approached slowly and picked up the trailing leash. "You don't attack people just because they look funny. We talked about this." Brutus made a small, almost apologetic sound. I know. But still." She turned to Thesserquai, who was still on the floor, his tendrils now a shocked shade of gray. "I'm really sorry, mister. Brutus didn't mean to scare you. He just gets excited about new things. That beast attacked me," Thesserquai managed to say once his translation implant recovered. "He was just playing," Riley insisted. "If he actually attacked you, you'd know. He'd go straight for the soft parts." This was not reassuring to anyone present. Dr. Thompson helped Thesserquai to his feet, or whatever Quilovians had instead of feet. "We sincerely apologize. We'll of course pay for any medical treatment or damaged clothing. My tendrils will take days to properly reorganize," Thesserquai wailed. "I have a gallery opening tomorrow. I cannot appear in public like this." "I can help with that," Dr. Yuki Thompson said calmly. She pulled out a small medical scanner and ran it over the Quilovian's tendrils. "Minor stress trauma. Nothing serious. I can prescribe a protein regenerator that should have you back to normal within 6 hours." Thesserquai's color shifted to a slightly calmer blue. "You can? I've studied Quilovian physiology extensively. You're actually quite fascinating from a medical perspective. Your tendril structure has some similarities to Earth octopi, but with a far more complex neural network." As Dr. Thompson led Thesserquai away toward the medical bay, discussing cellular regeneration in soothing tones, I turned to Riley and her father. "This cannot continue," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Your animal has now caused 2 major incidents in less than 4 hours. I'm going to have to ask you to confine him to your quarters for the remainder of your stay." Dr. Thompson nodded slowly. "I understand your concern, Kleix. But I need you to understand something about Brutus and Riley. They're bonded in a way that's difficult to explain to someone who hasn't grown up around Earth animals. I understand the human tendency toward anthropomorphization," I said stiffly. "But that doesn't change the fact that the creature is dangerous. He's not dangerous to Riley. Never has been, never will be. And she's learned more about responsibility, empathy, and courage from taking care of him than any amount of traditional education could teach her. That's a nice sentiment, but it doesn't help me explain to station authorities why we've had to evacuate 2 entire sections today." Riley, who'd been quietly petting Brutus, looked up at me with those large human eyes. "Mr. Kleix, I know Brutus is a lot to deal with. Humans are used to animals like him, but I guess other species aren't. But he's not just some pet I can lock away. He's my best friend. Would you lock away your best friend just because other people didn't understand them?" I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it again. The child had a point, even if I didn't want to admit it. "Riley," I said carefully, "I'm sure Brutus is very important to you. But other beings on this station have rights too. They have a right to feel safe." "What if I promise to keep him with me at all times?" Riley offered. "No more running off. I'll hold the leash really tight, and if he starts to get excited, I'll take him back to our quarters right away. Riley, I don't think that's going to be sufficient. Please? The child's voice cracked slightly. We came all this way, and I really wanted to show Brutus the stars. He's never seen anything like this before. None of us have. This is our first time leaving Earth's solar system. It's special. Something in her voice made me pause. I'd been so focused on the chaos and the damage reports that I'd forgotten. These were explorers, not diplomats or merchants or soldiers, just a family taking their first tentative steps into a galaxy much larger and stranger than anything they'd ever known. And they'd brought their weird, aggressive, fearless little animal friend because, to them, that was just what you did. You brought your family. I sighed, a sound that came out as a whistling through my breathing apertures. All right, here's what we're going to do. Brutus can remain out of quarters, but only in designated areas that I personally approve. And you, young Riley, are going to give me your word, as a human, that you'll keep him under control. I promise, Riley said solemnly. And if there's one more incident, just one, I'm calling the Galactic Animal Control Authority. And they'll confiscate him until your family leaves the station. Understood? Riley nodded vigorously. Brutus, perhaps sensing the gravity of the situation, actually looked up at me and made a small, almost polite chirping sound. Good. Now go back to your quarters and keep that creature there until dinner time. I need at least 3 hours without a honey badger emergency. The Thompson family left, Riley carrying Brutus in her arms like a furry, dangerous baby. I watched them go and wondered, not for the first time, what it said about humanity, that they'd looked at one of their planet's most fearless and aggressive predators and decided it would make an excellent companion for a 7-year-old child. Grix appeared beside me. You're getting soft, boss. I'm being pragmatic. Fighting that creature hasn't worked. Maybe cooperation will. Or, Grix said thoughtfully, you're starting to understand humans. That's a terrifying thought. Tell me about it. The next few hours passed quietly. I caught up on administrative work, processed some cargo manifests, mediated a minor dispute between 2 merchant vessels over docking priority. Normal station business. Peaceful station business. Then my communicator chirped. Klax, said Torvik's voice, and I could hear the exhaustion in it. We have another situation. Please tell me it's not the honey badger. Actually, this time it's not, but it involves the honey badger. I'm not sure I understand the distinction. Just get down to docking bay 7. Now, I arrived to find a scene that would have been comical if it weren't so potentially disastrous. A Krell battle cruiser had docked, and its commander, a massive warrior named Gorthak the Merciless, was standing in the bay, surrounded by 20 armed soldiers. Facing them, about 15 feet away, was Riley Thompson. She was holding Brutus in her arms. The honey badger looked calm, almost bored. What is happening here? I demanded. Gorthak turned to me, his reptilian features twisted in what I'd learned was Krell anger. This human child's beast attacked one of my warriors earlier today. This is a matter of honor. The creature must face justice. Justice, I said slowly. Or revenge. Among my people, they are the same thing. Riley stepped forward, and I was struck by how small she looked compared to the armed Krell warriors. Yet her voice was steady when she spoke. Brutus didn't attack your warrior. He just bit him a little because your warrior tried to grab him first. A little? Gorthak roared. Grimlock required 17 stitches. Well, maybe Grimlock should have asked permission before touching someone else's friend. The sheer audacity of this response left Gorthak momentarily speechless. I took advantage of the pause. Commander Gorthak, I understand your warrior's pride is injured, but surely the Krell, of all species, understand the concept of a worthy opponent. The honey badger was simply defending itself. It is a small, weak creature. There is no honor in being bested by such a thing. Brutus isn't weak, Riley said, and there was steel in her young voice. He's strong where it counts, in here. She pointed to her chest, approximately where a human heart would be. He doesn't give up. Ever. Isn't that what warriors are supposed to do? Gorthak stared at the child for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound that echoed through the docking bay. You have spirit, small human, and your beast has courage. Perhaps there is honor in this after all. He turned to his warriors. We will consider the matter settled. But know this. If your creature attacks another Krell, we will respond with force. That's fair, Riley said. Then, to my absolute horror, she walked up to Gorthak and held out Brutus. Do you want to pet him? He likes it behind the ears. Every weapon in the bay raised simultaneously. Riley, no, I shouted. But Gorthak held up one clawed hand, stopping his warriors. He looked at the honey badger, and the honey badger looked back, utterly fearless. Slowly, carefully, the Krell commander reached out one massive hand and gently scratched behind Brutus's ear. The honey badger made a contented chirping sound. Remarkable, Gorthak said softly. Such a small thing, yet it fears nothing. Not even a Krell warband. There is something to be learned from this creature. Honey badgers teach us lots of things, Riley said. Like how being brave doesn't mean being big, and how standing up for yourself is important, even if everyone else is bigger than you, and how the best friends are the ones who stick with you even when things get scary. Gorthak nodded slowly. Wise words, small human. You honor your companion well. He looked at me. Administrator Klykes, I hereby withdraw any complaint against this creature. Let it be known that Gorthak the Merciless has declared the honey badger Brutus to be a warrior of worthy spirit. With that, the Krell commander and his troops marched back onto their ship. The airlock sealed behind them with a hiss. I stood in the docking bay, trying to process what had just happened. A 7-year-old human child had just negotiated peace with a Krell warband, using a honey badger as a diplomat. Riley, I said weakly, that was incredibly dangerous and incredibly stupid and somehow also incredibly brave. Thanks, she said, completely missing which part I'd meant as a compliment. Dr. Thompson and Dr. Yuki Thompson appeared from where they'd been watching from a safe distance. Neither looked particularly surprised by what had just transpired. Should I ask, Doctor? Thompson said, or just be grateful nobody got hurt. The Krell wanted revenge for the earlier incident, I explained. Your daughter apparently resolved it through the power of interspecies friendship. That sounds about right, Doctor, Yuki Thompson said, smiling. Riley's always been good at making friends in unexpected places. I'm beginning to understand that about humans in general. We walked back, toward the main station in comfortable silence. Brutus had fallen asleep in Riley's arms, exhausted from his eventful day. He looked almost peaceful, if you ignored the scars on his snout and the general air of barely contained violence. Klykes, Riley said as we approached the commercial district. I'm sorry Brutus caused so much trouble today. I know you were just trying to keep everyone safe. I appreciate the apology. And I'm sorry if I was too harsh earlier. I'm still learning about humans and your companion animals. That's okay. Lots of people don't understand about Brutus at first. But once they get to know him, they see he's not really mean. He's just really, really determined. And he loves his family. Me and Mom and Dad. We're his pack. Pack? Yeah. Honey badgers usually live alone in the wild. But Brutus chose us. That makes us special. I thought about that as we reached the Thompson family's temporary quarters. This small human child had something most adults in the galaxy never achieved. Absolute trust. With a creature that most beings would call untamable. Riley, I said, may I ask you something? Sure. Why did your parents let you keep Brutus? Most human parents, from what I understand, choose safer pets for their children. Dogs, cats, those small furry things called hamsters. Riley's expression grew thoughtful. I found Brutus when I was 5. He was hurt, caught in some old wire fencing near our house. Everyone said to leave him alone, that he was dangerous. But I could see he was scared and in pain. So I talked to him really quietly and told him I just wanted to help. And he let me get close enough to cut the wires. After that, he just kind of stayed. Mom said it was unusual. Dad said it was impossible. But Brutus didn't care about possible or impossible. He'd chosen me, and I'd chosen him. And your parents accepted this? They were worried at first. Really worried. But then they saw that Brutus was never aggressive with me. Not once. He protected me. When I fell out of a tree and broke my arm, he stayed right next to me until help came. When I had nightmares, he'd sleep on my bed and make those chirping sounds until I felt better. He's not just a pet. He's family. And you don't give up on family. I felt my chromatic sac shift to a warm orange, the color of understanding. No. I suppose you don't. The Thompson family's departure the next morning was mercifully uneventful. Brutus remained in his carrier, which had been reinforced with additional security measures. Riley said her goodbyes to various station residents who'd come to see them off, including, surprisingly, Thesser Qui, whose tendrils had been restored to their former glory. Thank you for the medical assistance, the Quilovian said to Dr. Yuki Thompson. And please tell your daughter that I hold no grudge against her companion. He simply reminded me that sometimes art must shake us from our comfort. Very literally, in this case. As their shuttle prepared to depart, Riley pressed her face against the viewport and waved at me. I waved back with my upper appendage. Boss, Grix said beside me. That was one of the strangest 24 hours I've experienced in my entire career. Agreed. Think they'll come back? I watched the shuttle disappear into the traffic lanes, carrying the Thompson family and their impossible honey badger back toward Earth space. I hope so. The galaxy needs more beings like them. Chaos-causing, rule-breaking, sweet-talking little troublemakers with dangerous pets. No. Beings who look at something fierce and untamable and see a friend. Who choose loyalty over safety. Who teach the rest of us that maybe being vulnerable isn't the same as being weak. Grix made a thoughtful humming sound. When did you become a philosopher? About the same time a 7-year-old human child taught me that courage comes in unexpected packages, some of them covered in black and white fur. I returned to my office and found a message waiting in my communication queue. It was from Riley, recorded just before departure. Her small face appeared on the screen. Hi, Mr. Kleix. Thank you for letting me find Brutus, and for not being too mad about everything. I know he was a lot to deal with. But I wanted you to know something important. Brutus really liked you, he told me. The recording shifted to show Brutus in his carrier, looking directly at the camera. The honey badger made one of those indecipherable chirping sounds. Riley's voice continued off-screen. He says you're brave for a non-predator species. That's a compliment, by the way. He says you could probably survive on Earth if you ever wanted to visit. Not like, in the wild parts, but maybe in a city. With supervision. The image returned to Riley. Anyway, I hope we can come back someday. There's so much more of the galaxy to see, and Brutus wants to make more friends. Well, his version of friends. Which sometimes looks like fighting but is actually just how he says hello. She paused, then smiled that bright human smile. Oh, and Mr. Kleix? That thing you said about understanding humans? You're getting pretty good at it. See you around the galaxy. The message ended. I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about honey badgers and human children, and the strange, chaotic, wonderful mess that was the galactic community. Somewhere out there, the Thompson family was traveling between the stars, bringing their particular brand of determined chaos wherever they went. And the galaxy, whether it knew it or not, was better for it. I pulled up my terminal and began typing a new addition to the station protocols. Section 7. Subsection 12. Addendum 3. When dealing with humans and their companion animals, remember that their definition of friendship includes things that would terrify most species. This is not a flaw. This is a feature. Approach with caution, yes, but also approach with open minds. Because sometimes, the most important lessons come from the most unlikely teachers. Even if those teachers are small, aggressive, black and white, and capable of causing a station-wide emergency in under 4 hours. Especially then,